Well, we've talked about God in quite a lot of detail over the last couple of weeks, and especially the last couple of weeks deal with the idea of the Godhood, the Godhead, deity, as the Bible talks about it. And I've got maybe a bigger glimpse of who God is and all the different facets that He touches our lives. But sometimes when we talk to people, often we're asked about the idea, well, if God is so good, if God is so loving, if God is so caring, why do bad things happen? Why does God sometimes seem as if He's aloof, that He doesn't care, that He stands back and allows us to suffer? And probably that's a good question. It's a big question, and we're not the first to ask that question. And so, as we hopefully just catch a glimpse about what we can learn about God from the Old Testament, and how He dealt with His people in times past, and the impact it had in their lives, and hopefully we will learn something out of that that will have an impact on ours. So Habakkuk is a well-known book in the Old Testament, where really the frustration of God is expressed. Really the prophet Habakkuk had a real problem. And yet, in our scriptures, when you think about if it was a man-made book, you wouldn't think in a man-made book that you get nasty things said about God. But in reality, it's really, he is willing to express his frustration with God and really make some serious allegations against the God that we believe in. So listen to what Habakkuk says. He says, "How long, O Lord, must I call for help? You do not listen. I cry out to you, violence, but you do not save. Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. The law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so justice is perverted." So here's poor old Habakkuk. He's got a problem. He's got a problem with God. Because he thinks, you look around at the nation of Israel, and he's absolutely disgusted. He sees all sorts of injustice going on. He sees all sorts of things happening. And the good people seem to be the ones that are being oppressed. And the bad people seem to get away with literally, murder, in a sense. And he says, God, where are you? Where's the justice? When are you going to do something? God, where, and he's just really frustrated. And so he actually says stuff like this. And you can imagine him maybe shaking his fist and going, God, I'm isolated, I'm alone, I'm struggling, and I'm trying to understand. But really, where are you when I need you? That's basically what he's saying. Where are you when we need you? And that's really, can be echoed sometimes in even our own lives. But it's certainly echoed sometimes in the lives of people we speak to. You want me to believe in God? Where was he when such and such happened? Where was he when that did that and this did this? And where was he when, what kind of God do we believe in? And so, it's nothing new. That's the first lesson we need to learn. It's nothing new, okay? People have always thought that perhaps because God wasn't doing what they thought he ought to be doing, when they thought he ought to be doing it, that he just left them alone. He was no longer cared. He was walking away and just leaving us to our own devices. And so the words of Habakkuk are echoed. He expressed his frustration in three areas. He first says, God, where are you? The silence of God. I can't see you, I can't hear you, I can't see you doing anything. I call for help, but you do not listen. Now that's somebody who's really struggling, isn't it? I call for help, but where are you? And many even members of the congregation who have experienced their loved ones either in pain or ultimately dying. There must have been moments in their thinking where they thought, God, I don't want this to happen. Why are you allowing this to happen? Where are you? I'm talking to you, God. Where are you? And it's very, very human, very understandable. You are silent. We never hear from you. And the psalmist was not shy and vent the same frustrations. He said, how long, O Lord, will you forget me? Forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and every day have sorrow in my heart? Here's somebody in pain. Here's somebody who really feels, I've been left more devices, I'm all alone. Where are you when I need you, God? I can't hear you. I can't see you doing anything. And it just is so frustrating. And his fervent pleas were not, into his mind, we're not getting any response. So the second thing is silence of God. The second thing is the inactivity of God. You do not save, he says. You do nothing. This is it to God. You do nothing. You neither hear nor act. And that's, this is the God of the universe who brought everything into being, who sustains everything, who, when we're waking up in the morning, we're still breathing the oxygen of the air, he's still sustaining us. God's always working. And yet this guy is tearing out his heart and saying, you are doing nothing. Because, obviously, God's not doing what he thinks ought to be done. And that's a real frustration. And Jeremiah, he just says something very similar. Why are you like a stranger in the land? Like a traveller who stays only a night and then moves on. Prophet's asking why God doesn't stay around a bit longer to help resolve the problems. We're in a mess here, God. What are you going to do about it? When are you going to do something about it? Are you just going to walk away and leave us in this mess? Frustration. And we can perhaps sometimes identify with that. To Jeremiah and to us on occasion, God is so unlike the movie hero Superman. Superman can detect the faintest cry for help and responds like flying like a faster than a speeding bullet to rescue a cat trapped in a tree, or to save a man in a burning building, or to foil a bank robbery. If only God was like Superman. Here, there's a problem. Go, bang, away, problem solved. Isn't that the kind of God we want? There's God in action, isn't it? Superman. God should be Superman. And we can see him in action. We see the problem, we let people know about the problem, and next thing we know, the problem's being dealt with. And usually to their satisfaction, because the bad guy gets it. Okay? Here's Habakkuk. I'm crying to you, God. I'm waiting, God. What's happening, God? Where are you? You're doing nothing. Slightly different from old Superman. Superman's ministry involves him in immediate and effective interventions where people call his name. And yet it's God's apparent inactivity, God's failure to respond immediately to our cries for help that creates the frustration. He's silent. He doesn't seem to be there. Or is he just indifferent? Has he stopped caring? When we feel God is silent and inactive, it's only a short step to then think, well, he doesn't care, he's indifferent. I can be as much pain as I like, and God he's fiddling away somewhere on a cloud somewhere and forgotten all about me. He's enjoying himself and he doesn't care about the mess I'm in. Why do you tolerate wrong? The prophet asks us. And then later on he says, why do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? Injustice is going on all around the prophet. By God's own people, by the way. He's not even talking about the other nations around him. He's talking about God's own people. And he says, your people are going mad. They're abusing people. They're abusing their power. They're abusing authority. They're doing all sorts of stuff. And the bad guys seem to be outdoing the good guys in every sphere. When are you going to tell them off, God? When are you going to put them in their place? When are you going to make your plans work in their lives? And so he's frustrated. The silence of God, the inactivity of God, the indifference of God. But, fortunately, the book of Habakkuk doesn't end there. So he's shouting at God, he's let off steam, but God's going to step in and give him some answers. Of course, God doesn't always answer what we want to hear, that's the problem. So God does respond in Habakkuk 1, 5 to 11. God answers the prophet. God says to Habakkuk, he is wrong about all three charges. God is not silent, God is not inactive, and God is not indifferent. Behind the scenes, God is at work preparing the Babylonians to come in judgment upon the very people Habakkuk sees living in rebellion against God. Now that's good news, isn't it? God is doing something. No, it's bad news. You know, if you're frustrated with your own Jewish nation, who are breaking God's commandments and they're living the way they want to live, they're not doing what God wants them to do and behaving like God wants them to behave. So you want justice done, you want God to do something about it. And God says, I'm going to bring another nation. The Babylonians are going to come down and they're going to carry you off into captivity. What do you think of that then? What? You can't use the Babylon. They're worse than we are. But God says, I am doing something. I'm going to bring Babylonians. They're going to sort you guys out. You're going to spend time off in captivity. And when you come out of that captivity, you're going to be a better people. But that's not what I wanted to hear, God. That's the problem, isn't it? Sometimes God's solution is not the solution we're looking for. The solution sounds worse than the problem to poor old Habakkuk. There are times when it looks like God's doing nothing, and as Habakkuk and others have thought, when in fact God is doing extraordinary things. He's bringing about the power of a nation to bring justice to his own people. In fact, quite a few times in the Old Testament you'll hear the words, God's day of... What's the day? Day of God coming in judgment. And all sorts of nations over time. And he uses some unusual situations to bring about that act. And they're not always what we like to think about. So, from an old couple, Abraham and Sarah, God raised up a nation at a time when it looked like he was doing nothing. You imagine poor old Abraham, we looked at him a couple of years ago, we looked at him for a while. God says, while Abraham's still reasonably young, relatively young, he says, I'm going to bring through you a great nation. I'm going to raise up from you a huge nation. You're not going to be able to number the sons, like the sons of the sea. You're not going to be able to number them. So Abraham waits. And Abraham waits. And Abraham waits. And he's thinking to himself, what's going on? When? I'm getting older. She's getting older. When is this going to happen? When he's 100 years old. So it's not, you know, he's a young, fit, virile man. Oh, yeah, no problem. Bring a nation out to me, they won't at all. Worse than Frank, older than Frank. Frank says, I'm a bit dizzy. I bet Abraham, 100 is a bit dizzy. And he said, there's no chance, there's no way. How on earth can you do that now, God? God works on a different time scale. And ultimately, God brought about that which he promised with Abraham. God raised up Moses to deliver the Hebrew people from slavery when he looked like he'd forgotten them. 400 years, 250 odd years in slavery, 200 years to get there, and then 250 years in slavery. God's people, for 400 years, are in a different nation, working their backs off 12-hour days, 14-hour days, making cities for the Egyptians, being whipped practically every day because they're not working hard enough. All sorts of deprivation going on in their lives. And you would imagine, you know, it's bad enough 50 years going by. You imagine 450 years going by. God? What God? He's forgotten all about us. He must have. Look at the state we're in. What's our God going to do? When is he going to do anything? He must have pushed off and left us. And yet he raises up Moses. Look how long it takes to do Moses. Here's Moses first 40 years in Egypt, getting all the trappings, intelligent, getting all the university degree and all that fancy learning, good food at the king's table, Pharaoh's table. Then off in isolation, and he's out there herding sheep in the middle of the wilderness for 40 odd years. God's working. God's working rather slowly. 80 years goes past before God does something. and sends Moses back in to his people. And when he gets there, and the people said, "Who are you, God? We're surrounded by gods of Egypt. What's your particular God?" And he has to remind them of the kind of God they are. And the whole book of Deuteronomy is really, plus the end of Exodus, Exodus and Deuteronomy are really Moses telling the Jewish people about their own heritage. And the book of Genesis is involved. God, your God, is the creator. Your God is the one who brought you out of Egypt. And your God is the one who's going to bring you into the promised land. Does God work in our time scale? Does God work the way that we think He should work? Or is God, do we think, left us to our own devices? So poor old Moses is to deliver his people from slavery, even when it looked like to the people God had forgotten all about them. The Jewish nation again in trouble. The ruler is actually getting to the point where he's being encouraged to actually wipe out the Jews. And Esther is the right place at the right time to save the Jewish people. And the man who is really planning to destroy the Jews ends up on the rack, on the gibbet that is planned for the Jews. Is God working? How long did it take God to put Esther in the right place? How long did it take God to get Esther to be in the right situations, to do the right thing at the right point, to turn the full tide upon the Jewish people? So God raised up Esther to be queen so the Jews could be saved from extinction when it looked like they didn't have a friend on their side. God was working, but He was working in the background. And they didn't even understand how He was working. But why does God take so long to do something? Why does He move at the pace expected by Habakkuk? We need to remember that God's judgment is tempered by patience and ultimately designed to bring sinners to repentance. Remember when the Jews were meant to go off into they became Jews, go off into the promised land? And when the promise was given to Abraham, they said, in 400 odd years, when the sins of the Amorites are full, God was going to use Israel to come in judgment upon the Amorite nation. The Amorites, I would imagine 400 years before God came in judgment with the Jews, they were quite happy, thinking, we can do anything. We can get away with anything. And living lives, totally leaving God out of their lives. And they never imagined that God would ever come in judgment upon them. They could be as bad as they wanted to be, and they thought they could get away with it. But even before then, God knew there would come a time when I am going to come on judgment upon you. Okay?
It's a bit odd that Abraham was an Amorite.
Well, that's true as well. He used his own people eventually against them. Yeah. It's fascinating. When you look at it in that light, when you look at the big picture, and that's the problem with us. When we're in trouble, when things are happening around us that give us almost tunnel vision, we think, what on earth is God doing? When is God doing something? Is He going to do something? And is He going to do it now? We forget about the big picture. And God's always working on the big picture. And therefore, His answer sometimes is wait. Or settling up now. For example, God delayed His judgment on the Amorites for the sin of the Amorites had reached its full measure. God was giving them time to repent. And Paul reminds us that our salvation is due to the patience of God. God could easily have stopped the world. He could have said, that's it, I'm finishing everything off. But the writer says, God is patient towards us, giving us time to repent, giving us time to come to our senses, giving us time to acknowledge God and want to follow God. Paul in Romans says, do you show contempt for the riches of His kindness, tolerance, and patience, not realizing that God's kindness leads you to repentance? Often it's a real thing. It's a bit like When Jesus talked about the meek shall inherit the earth, talking about meekness. When they talked about people in the world about meekness, they think about weakness. They think if you turn the other cheek, you must be weak. And that's not the case. Well, it might be the case for the guy 6'4". That was a sensible decision to turn the other cheek. But if it's somebody, if you're bigger than them, and you could do something about it, and yet you turn away, that's a different ballgame altogether. Meekness is strength under control. And God sees us to have strength under control. But sometimes when we're kind to people who are nasty to us, they don't see that as kindness. They don't see that as us giving them another chance. They see that as, here's somebody that I can manipulate. Here's somebody I can rip off. This is somebody I can take from time and time and time again. Because they think we're weak. And they don't see the strength in what we're doing. It's easy to lash out when things are going wrong. But it's more difficult to control yourself under that situation. So the prophet teaches us about God's slowness in bringing judgment and responding to his pleas. It's a fact of the display of his gracious love towards sinners. He delays so that people have an opportunity to repent and turn to him. The prophet teaches that God doesn't operate on our schedule or follow our agenda. God has got his own timetable and he has everything under his control. When we look at the world today, I think, on average, when we look at Syria, Iraq, Libya, goodness gracious me, some of the African nations, the mess they're in, and we think, God, where are you? What are you going to do about this? When are you going to sort all this out? One of the interesting things might be that he might be turning around and saying, well, I've given you a brain, I've given you hands, I've given you a feet, I've given you a voice. When are you going to do something about some of these? I want to use you, but you don't want to be used. The world needs Jesus. The world needs salvation. The world needs to know that God's a God of love. But ultimately, God's going to come in judgment. And he says, I've given you a job to do. Are we doing a job? That's a good question. Okay? Sometimes it's not necessary for God to suddenly come in a chariot and we've got all guns blaze and say, right, I'm going to sort you out. He's sending somebody like you and somebody like me to say, God wants to sort you out. He wants to save you. He wants to change your life and challenge your life. And so he sometimes uses our hands and our feet rather than us waiting for something spectacular to happen from him. The prophet teaches that God doesn't operate in our schedule or follow our agenda. He definitely has his own timetable. And it's really difficult to understand that in that timetable, everything is under his control. So those who have mistreated the poor, stolen from the weak, engaged in extortion, practiced idolatry, ultimately will not escape God's judgment. The cup from the Lord's right hand is coming round to you, the message was addressed to Israel. You want judgment, you want something to be done? God's coming. And when he comes, you're not going to like it, because he's going to sort you out. So poor old Habakkuk, he was in a cleft stick, he was a hiding to nothing, because he was in the midst of a nation that God was going to come and judgment on. And he was pleading for God to do something. And then God says, I'm doing it. And then he was trying to plead, God, don't do something.
God says, you think that's bad, do you?
That's right.
You want to bring a nation on, your ears will sing the one I finish with you. You think, you're having a hard time right now?
Just wait. That's good news. That's the good news, okay? So, somebody once said, be careful what you ask for, because you might get it. And poor old Habakkuk, he got it. Elder Habakkuk expressed frustration with God for apparently doing nothing, for delaying and bringing judgment, but he has since learned that the righteous shall live by faith. Okay, we need to have faith in him. And the voice of faith, having taken a panoramic view of God's dealing with Israel, the prophet is impressed. He now wants God to display the same awesome power once again to rise up and vindicate his holy name in the midst of his nations, he said, enemies, he says, Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, O Lord. Renew them in our day, in our time. Make them known in wrath. Remember mercy. You know, he's heard of the captives coming out of Egypt. He's heard of the crossing of the sea, where God's people are able to walk away from the army that's chasing them. And the army that's chasing them ends up being buried in the waves. Our God is an awesome God. God, show us that again. God, demonstrate your power.
You know, he's been told the Assyrians are coming.
And then he's told us the Assyrians coming in.
Just wait.
The judgment is imminent. Although it linger, wait for it, it will certainly come and will not delay. Though the coming judgment fills him with fear, the prophet has made God his strength and his refuge and his well. He says, I will trust you. I'm willing to live by faith. And that's what faith is. Trusting God when things are going well. Trusting God when things are going badly. Trusting God in every situation in between. God knows what he's doing. I just need to play my part. We need to have faith and trust that God knows the big picture. That God knows what is needed. And God ultimately will bring about what is needed. We'll hold it there. Okay? Interesting though, isn't it? It's good stuff. It's all in the book, you know.
Mordecai says to Esther, has it occurred to you that you may have been raised up this time?
Yeah, the right woman in the right place. As a matter of fact, she shouldn't have been able to have access to the king like that.
Actually, no, she took her life out of her.
She actually technically faced death.
Yeah.
If the king had been in a bad mood, he would never have let her in to talk to him.
If she hadn't been so good looking.
Well, that would help as well. Yes, perhaps if God had raised up somebody else who's been, 15 stone or 20 stone, the outcome may be slightly different. But yes, she was the right person at the right time with the right looks to get access to the right king who had the power to do the job. Yeah, interesting. Okay. Bernard, we'd like to close with one prayer.